The first thing people noticed about the woman was how calm she looked. Not happy, not nervous, just calm. She stood alone near the railing of Deck 7 as the cruise ship drifted through the Gulf of Mexico under a sky so dark it looked painted on. Wind moved through her hair while music from the pool deck echoed faintly behind her. Vacation music, steel drums and laughter and glasses clinking. 3 hours later, she would be dead, and everyone on board would swear they never saw a thing. Her name was Elena Morales, 32 years old, recently divorced, former travel nurse from Houston. According to the people she met during the trip, she booked the cruise alone because she needed to disappear for a few days. That was the phrase she kept using. Disappear. The ship itself was called the Midnight Crest, a mid-sized luxury cruise liner that ran weekly routes between Galveston and Cozumel. Not famous, not flashy, just expensive enough to attract couples celebrating anniversaries, retirees with money, and people trying to start over. Elena boarded on a Thursday afternoon, carrying only one suitcase and a leather shoulder bag she never let out of her sight. Security footage later showed she arrived early, earlier than most passengers. She spent nearly 40 minutes sitting in the terminal lobby, staring out at the water before finally boarding. Nobody knew it then, but she had already called her sister 3 times that morning. The last voicemail would become important later. "If something happens to me," she said quietly, "don't believe it was an accident." At first, nobody took that seriously, not even her sister, because Elena had always been dramatic. At least that's what everyone said. The first 2 days of the cruise were normal enough. She ate alone most nights, but talked easily with strangers. Bartenders remembered her because she tipped well. A photographer remembered her because she refused every photo package, but still smiled politely for every shot. And then there was Marcus Reed, 41 years old, clean cut, expensive watch. Traveled alone too. According to witnesses, Marcus and Elena met on the second night near the piano bar. They spoke for almost 2 hours. Staff members later described the conversation as intense but friendly. At one point, Elena even laughed hard enough to spill her drink. By midnight, they were seen walking the outer deck together, holding hands. That mattered later too. Because when Elena's body was found the next morning, Marcus Reed was nowhere to be found. At 6:14 a.m., a crew member discovered Elena lying near a maintenance corridor on Deck 3, far below the luxury suites and entertainment areas. It was an employee-only section rarely used by passengers. She had bruising around her neck, a fractured wrist, and a deep cut above her left eye. At first glance, it looked like she'd fallen down the metal staircase nearby. But the ship's doctor noticed something immediately. The bruises on her throat were fresh. Someone had grabbed her, hard. Security locked down the ship within minutes. No passengers were allowed to disembark when the ship reached Cozumel later that morning. Mexican authorities boarded alongside private cruise security officers, and interviews began immediately. That's when things started getting strange. Because almost everyone remembered seeing Elena, but nobody remembered seeing her scared. In fact, several passengers claimed she seemed happier after meeting Marcus. One woman even described them as a couple reconnecting after years apart. But that made no sense. According to Marcus Reed's guest profile, he and Elena had never met before the cruise, at least officially. Then investigators searched Elena's cabin. Inside her bedside drawer, they found a folded photograph, old, creased, water-damaged. It showed Elena standing beside a younger man outside a marina somewhere in Florida. The man's face was partially obscured by sunglasses and a baseball cap, but investigators recognized him instantly. Marcus Reed. Only his real name wasn't Marcus Reed. It was Daniel Mercer, and 5 years earlier he'd been the prime suspect in another woman's disappearance. Her name was Rachel Vance. Rachel vanished after a private boating trip near Tampa. Her body was never recovered. Daniel Mercer claimed she fell overboard during a storm. Investigators suspected foul play but couldn't prove anything. The case went cold. Until Elena boarded the Midnight Crest, suddenly the cruise became something very different. Not a random murder, a meeting, maybe even a trap. Authorities dug deeper into Elena's background and uncovered something nobody expected. She had known Rachel Vance, not closely, but enough. The two women worked briefly at the same medical clinic in Houston years earlier. Phone records later revealed they stayed in contact long after Rachel moved to Florida. Then investigators uncovered the biggest shock of all. 3 weeks before boarding the cruise, Elena searched online for Daniel Mercer over 40 times. She knew who he was, she knew his fake name, and somehow she knew he would be on that ship. The question was why. Passengers described the atmosphere on board after the body was discovered as terrifying. Nobody slept. Rumors spread through every hallway. Parents kept children inside cabins. Some guests demanded armed escorts from security. And all the while, Daniel Mercer remained missing. Until late that evening, a bartender on Deck 9 recognized him sitting alone near the smoking lounge wearing different clothes and a shaved beard. He was arrested immediately. At first, Daniel denied everything. He claimed he barely knew Elena, said they flirted during the cruise, but nothing more. According to him, they separated around midnight after an argument over money. But detectives noticed inconsistencies right away. For one thing, Daniel had scratches across both hands. For another, security footage showed him entering a restricted stairwell shortly before Elena's estimated time of death. Then came the evidence that broke the case open completely. Elena's leather shoulder bag, the bag she never let out of her sight. It was found hidden behind cleaning supplies in another maintenance corridor 2 decks above where her body was discovered. Inside were printed documents about Rachel Vance's disappearance, photographs, phone numbers, and handwritten notes about Daniel Mercer. But buried underneath all of that was something investigators didn't expect: a digital voice recorder. The recording lasted 19 minutes. Most of it was muffled background noise from wind and footsteps. Then Elena's voice became clear. "You killed Rachel," she said. A man answered, "You shouldn't have come here." Investigators later confirmed the voice belonged to Daniel Mercer. What followed sounded less like an argument and more like a negotiation. Elena explained that Rachel had told her years earlier she was afraid of Daniel, afraid enough that she once mailed Elena copies of private journal entries in case something happened. After Rachel vanished, Elena kept those journals, and according to the recording, she became obsessed with proving Daniel murdered her friend. For years, she couldn't, until she discovered something online 6 months before the cruise. Daniel had started using dating sites under fake names, targeting wealthy divorced women who traveled alone. One of those fake profiles advertised plans for luxury cruises. That's when Elena came up with her plan. She booked the same cruise, used a fake story about a recent divorce, and waited for him to approach her. The recording revealed she intended to confront him privately and secretly capture a confession. At first, it almost worked. For nearly 15 minutes, Daniel denied everything. Then Elena mentioned Rachel's journals. Silence. Long silence. Then Daniel spoke softly. She wasn't supposed to die. Investigators would later say that single sentence solved 2 cases at once. But the recording didn't end there. Elena pushed harder after that. Too hard. "You killed her," she said again. Then came the sound of movement. Footsteps scraping metal. Elena suddenly gasped. Her voice turned sharp with panic. "Daniel?" Then screaming. The recorder continued running after the attack. Investigators could hear Elena struggling for breath while Daniel cursed under his breath. Then another sound, a heavy impact, her body hitting metal stairs. The recording ended 20 seconds later. By the time authorities finished listening to it, Daniel Mercer had stopped talking entirely. The trial became national news, partly because of the cruise setting, partly because of Rachel's reopened disappearance case, but mostly because people couldn't stop debating Elena herself. Some called her brave, others called her reckless, because the truth was uncomfortable. Elena wasn't a detective. She wasn't law enforcement. She was a grieving woman trying to force a killer into confessing alone on a ship surrounded by thousands of strangers, and it cost her life. Daniel Mercer was eventually convicted of second-degree murder for Elena's death and later accepted a plea deal connected to Rachel Vance's presumed murder. He received a life sentence without parole. Authorities never recovered Rachel's body. But after the sentencing, investigators searched property connected to Daniel near a remote marina outside Tampa. There, buried beneath a collapsed storage shed, They found Rachel's necklace and fragments of clothing matching photographs from the original missing persons report. For Rachel's family, it was enough. For Elena's sister, it wasn't. During one interview after the trial, she said something that stayed with people for years. She knew she might die, she said. That's the worst part. She went anyway. The Midnight Crest continued operating for another 4 years before the company quietly sold the ship to another cruise line overseas. Crew members later claimed passengers occasionally asked about the murder cruise after hearing rumors online. Some employees even refused to work overnight shifts near the lower maintenance decks where Elena died. One security guard claimed he heard screaming there long after the ship returned to service. Most people dismissed those stories. But one detail from the investigation still bothers people who followed the case closely. During the final minutes of the recording, just before the struggle began, investigators enhanced a faint sound in the background. A second voice, very quiet, almost impossible to hear, a woman whispering. Experts could never identify it. Some believed it came from another passenger nearby. Others thought it was audio distortion from the wind. But conspiracy forums obsessed over a different possibility entirely. They believed the voice belonged to Rachel Vance. The woman Daniel claimed fell overboard years earlier, whispering only 3 words before Eleanor screamed, "He did it."